This time we will have a slightly similar but different video about the testing. So it will just add up on the testing video that we just did last time, but this time we want to verify the addresses. So it's basically the same functionality, but just on a different entity. In this particular case, this embedded entity. So let's get started. Here we have already our test case for the customer integration test with the verification of a valid customer with the valid email, valid email address, and then also valid address. So one option would be to create here a new class, which we would say address integration test. So let's see how this will go. For the verification of the validation, we actually don't need a customer object anymore, so we can get rid of this one, and then we can just take this test here as a baseline and see where this is going. So given address with invalid street, when validate address, then address is invalid. And here it would be that we say data manager create address.class and store that as a variable. And then we say set street is, for example, null. And here now we do the same thing as we did before. So now the variable that is returned is actually not of type customer anymore, but of type address. So let's just fix that. And here we copied over this first violation helper method, which is now actually also of type address. So let's do it like this here and see if this already works. So I will go ahead here and change the street attribute. And then let's run the test and see what is the result. So it should actually fail, and the reason is that I didn't change this one here because the error message is actually now slightly different, so it's not blank, which means we can just fix that. But as you might see here already, now we have actually these helper methods and these verifications. If you look at the customer integration test, they are very similar. So what we probably can do is to come up with an abstraction that helps us testing these violations a little bit easier. And for that, we can just create a bean that actually lives only in the test environment and acts as a helper functionality for this whole verification of violations of constraints. So let me just create a new Java class here, which will, let's call it validation verification. And this will be a component. And perhaps we just go here to the address and say how we would actually like to drive or like how we would like to use this API. So first of all, we could create new auto wiring here for our validation verification. And perhaps it's not even needed anymore that we directly interact with this validator bean, but instead only do it via this bean. So the thing that we could do is, for example, say, for example, make this validate here as a mirror. But since we actually, this is just noise for the test case, we can also put it inside of this helper method. So let's just create a method here, which let me just return back here. So I think it's easier if I just do it from here, because then IntelliJ will create the correct method and signature, basically, because I already have here the return value specified. So I can now go ahead here and say I would like to create such a thing, and here we can auto wire the validator. So for now, this will just be just a regular delegation object, but we can make that even better over time. So let's start easy here with this validate method. Okay, so if we run this test once again, it should still be fine because I didn't do anything else. And then the next thing is probably here this toString hack that we did before, we can now fix, so that it's somehow inlined in this, in this abstraction, if we want to call it like this. And secondly, that we get rid of these test methods here, or these helper methods. So for that, what we would actually need to do is to create an object. So instead of that we directly interact with this constraint violation, we could also create like an inner class here. Let's call it perhaps validation result or something like this. And here, or let's do it like this, and then I will here map it into this new object. Sorry, no, this will be the validation result. And here we can put this address violation as a parameter and create a corresponding constructor. And then we can also store this field and make it final. So the reason why I'm doing that is to, have like a proper object where I can now put methods in, and then we can, have some helper methods within this method. So the last thing that I need to do is to put it to a list. So, and now IntelliJ correctly says that the return value here that I specified is not actually matching anymore. So let's fix that. And then we can also change this here. So if we now go back to our test, then the test has the problem that the variable is not valid anymore. Oh, no, sorry, now I did the wrong thing. So we want to change the variable actually. And so what we could say is, since this is now a list, we could say violations get 0 and then get property or like attribute. Perhaps this is even better, because this is about the attribute of the entity. And here inside now we can just do this and do this heavy lifting of this constraint violation actually as part of this. Let me perhaps just change it to constraint or like just violation, and the same goes for the parameter here. So this means this one should now still be fine, and the second one would be that we don't have this get attribute, but instead we could say get error type or something. And when we do that, we could return this string, and then we can in the test compare it to our expected value that we would like to have. So if we now create this method here and then we can return violation get message template. So this is now just once again a delegation. So let's see if this already helps. Now I can get rid of this method because it's not needed anymore. And expecting that we didn't break anything, the test should still be fine. Okay, and this is the case. So then the last part would be that we actually also get rid of this one here, because this is also still a little bit of noise. So what we could do is now say, yeah, what we could, for example, do is have a method in this verification object to say, yeah, so if we go here, for example, what we could do is to say we want to delegate this method into this object. So yeah, perhaps let's do it like this. So we say validation message, and then we just pass in this not blank part here, because this is the one that is actually relevant for our test. And then it should return this particular value. So let's just create this one here. So yeah, so with that, it should actually hopefully read a little bit better already. Let's see what the results look like. Okay, still be fine. And then perhaps the last thing that really drives me a little bit crazy here is this get zero, because it's just also a little bit of noise. So what we perhaps could do is to have another method which is just returning one result. So we could say, instead of this one, we could do validate first or something like this. And then, yeah, we'll basically just delegate to our validate method. And yeah, with that, we actually now have two things. So first of all, we check that there's only one error, and then we check on the content of the error. So this means actually what we could do is to split this test into two test cases. And I will just do that here. So for this one, we don't check on the size anymore, because we know that it's already the size 1. And instead, we just create this, it's actually street violation. And we can use the same thing here. And now we just have to change the name of this test. So here, actually, we don't check if the, yeah, it's not really much about the street or of the characteristics that actually, you know, it's more about the fact that we now have one error. So we perhaps just put that into this test method here. One error. Okay, and then we say address is invalid because of street. Perhaps let's do it like this. Let me just fix fix my spelling here. Okay, and with that, we now should already be almost fine. We can once again make that into a field here, this data manager create part, and I will just put it in the setup method. And then we can get rid of this. So with that, the test already looks way cleaner. We don't need this validator anymore. And since we don't store this as well in this address integration test, it's actually just about validation, which we can even reflect in our test case name. So perhaps let's do it like this: address validation test, or yeah, perhaps I will get rid of this integration part here. And then, yeah, the last thing would just be to fix our customer integration test to also leverage this new functionality. So this means I could copy this here and make a dedicated test for the customer validation test, where I also use this validation verification and just rewrite it so that it will just take the customer. No, so this was a little bit too, so it should only be words. Yes, this would be it. Okay, and then we have customer set email, and our test case was that we say not or invalid email address. And perhaps we can copy the test case name over here. Or actually, yeah, if we now want to stick to the same pattern to just verify here the size, and then secondly the attribute itself here, then we can actually just make it like this, and then also say one violation occurs. Yeah, now comes an interesting part. So let me just comment this one out here, or yeah, we can also just copy this one, because now our verification object is not really supposed to be working with this customer object until now. So if we look at the of this thing, then it actually expect an address. So instead we can introduce some generics here, because it's not really about the object, because here when we take a look at the validates, you can also see that it's of type T and not of type address or whatever. So this means I can just here say this is going to be T, and then the next thing here is that we also have to do this one in order to make it, no, not this one. So what we want, yeah, it would actually be, have to do it here, I guess. And this one should not be declared. Yeah, exactly. So now we have this one stored, and then we have to do the same thing here, which is also T. So yeah, this already looks quite good. Let's take a look at the source code and how to run this for the customer validation. So we have still one import error. Yeah, we can get rid of this one. And now let's take a look if the test case are running. Well, one of them does, and the second one does not, because we don't check on the street anymore, and we also should check on the email address. Yeah, so with this dedicated bean, we basically have created like an abstraction for our integration test to make the testing of the business logic a little bit easier. And yeah, now with this making it generic, independent of the entity, we can also use it for the customer validation. So this means here I would completely get rid of this test because we have now our new test that is actually fine. And here we are just, checking on the actual saving operation and not the validation anymore. So this already looks good. And then we also don't need the validator anymore. And in this case, we can, since we only have right now one test, we could even, put it back to our test case, but for now I'll just leave it like this. So with that, let's just rerun all the tests once again to verify that everything is fine. And if this is the case, then we have now also validated our addresses. Okay, so 5 tests pass. Okay, so I misspelled also this one. Okay. Yes, with that, pull request is created, and we can just go ahead and just expect the Jenkins to, or sorry, the CI system to be running. And with that, I would immediately close this video. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.